Is it unusual for a woman to think her own miscarriages aren't a big deal?
The first miscarriage I cried and was so sad. The second one, my blood didn't register I was even pregnant anymore. It grossed me out to think of something dead in me. So I was like, let's do this. Bring on the D&C, and didn't really care as much as the first one that still had a heartbeat till the end. The hospital had switched policies on handling miscarriages. The first one they were like, it happens. Get over it. The second one, they offered priests, counselors, pamphlets and tried to pat me a lot. It was weird because I could have used that attitude for the first one.
No. I had a miscarriage at 6 weeks. It was a planned pregnancy and I was a bit disappointed, but I didn't feel grief. I figured there was probably something wrong with the fetus, so it was probably for the best. Anyway, at 6 weeks it just felt like a very heavy, painful period. If I hadn't been actively trying to get pregnant, I may not have even noticed. My periods are not super regular. Luckily I fell pregnant with my son about 6 weeks later, so it all turned out good, and I also had a daughter 2 years later. A stillborn baby would be a different story. That would be terrible to go through. My aunt had a baby boy who died in utero at full term and she still had to give birth to him knowing he was dead. That was 40 years ago, and she still talks about him from time to time. I don't know how I'd get over that. I always thought the main reason people get sad over miscarriages is because they really wanted a child, while having none prior, but all those months expecting and they couldn't have it. Would you say, as a mother, that this is something that went through your mind during your first miscarriage?
This is part of the reason people normally wait before announcing they are pregnant. So you don't have to make a big deal about it if it doesn't become a full-term pregnancy. I had 4 miscarriages before my daughter was born, all before 12 weeks. I didn't grieve a baby or person, but it did become progressively harder. The physical aspect, what felt like a waste of time, felt like being stuck in limbo. In some ways it felt like I was in the first trimester for 3 years. I thought rationally that it wasn't a big deal, but dreaded being in my gynea's office. Knowing you have children would make it easier, I imagine, than wondering if this will ever work out. First MC wasn't traumatic though, I'd say number 3 onwards was difficult for me.
Not heartless at all. I've been exactly the same about my miscarriages. 10 weeks and 15 weeks. Sad and not a nice experience. But husband and I grieved quietly and got on with things. For me, I kinda look at it as life's way of saying it wasn't meant to be. I do have other kids now. So I understand this may make it easier. I do also appreciate everyone copes differently with loss and grief. Though, and I try to empathize and move and let live and not judge. What annoys me is when others expect me to grieve and cope as they do. E.g. my Sil, who had MC2, was very annoyed with us because we had never told her. This was about 10 years after the fact, and it just randomly came up one time. She said we should have had a funeral to allow everyone in the family to grieve.
And that we should have marked the anniversary with the family every year. As this is what she does with her MC. Like, WTF? You do you and let me do me. People are weird.
In addition to all the comments saying that your reaction is totally fine. I just want to add for context that about 20% of pregnancies end in a miscarriage, and most of them happen so early on that the mother often didn't even know she was even pregnant and just thinks it's a heavy period, or she just hasn't built an intense relationship with the embryo yet. Because she doesn't feel like she's pregnant yet, and it's all a bit abstract. When I did an internship in a gynecology department and I had to take my patient's history, hardly any woman over 40 hadn't had at least one miscarriage. Miscarriages are an extremely common thing, and while it is absolutely okay to grieve for so many reasons, it is also okay not to, and to just accept that that's how nature goes sometimes. I had 4 miscarriages and 3 children. With the miscarriages, I saw it as just a natural response to an unviable pregnancy. I do understand why it might be an emotional experience for some. When you find out you are pregnant, you don't think in terms of a cluster of cells. Often there is grief for what might have been. Envisaging a fully formed baby. I think we need to respect the response regardless whether it matches ours.
No. And you're not heartless. They weren't meant to be. For whatever reason your body rejected them, and that is that. Not your fault, no reason to think it was. And, in my opinion, no reason to make a huge deal about it. You're good.
Your view sounds perfectly reasonable to me, not heartless at all. I've had 3. And my reactions to and feelings about each one are so different. Even today, there's no one correct way to think or feel about something. My first was a twin at 12 weeks. I was too young to become a mom of one, let alone 2. And that one barely registered with me until much later in life. My second was at 11 weeks. And I was absolutely devastated. This time I was married. It was planned. And it was already a person to me. I grieved super hard for a long time. After the D&C, the genetic testing indicated it was a girl, and knowing that makes it even worse. When I see 4 to 5-year-olds now, I still feel sad thinking about what could have been. And then a few months later I had another at 4 weeks. Literally the day after I tested. And I was sad. But more of a sad that I wasn't successful at conceiving. I haven't gotten pregnant since, and I often wonder if I had had a successful pregnancy, would that second loss still devastate me so much? I had a really hard time with my miscarriage at 18 weeks. I really thought I was in the clear in the second trimester. I think I would have been okay pre-10 weeks. My experience was like labor and delivery by myself at home. And the fetus I lost looked so perfect I felt terrible for losing him. I think a lot of the grief surrounding miscarriage depends on the attachment to the idea of pregnancy as a whole. I have never been pregnant. So I spoke to my mom about this at length, who was always very honest with me about procreation and our family planning, as it were. I asked her in my teens if she ever had a miscarriage. This happened after my aunt lost her baby. However, it was on the late stages of pregnancy. So it was a stillbirth and not a miscarriage at that point. This was an absolutely devastating event for her and her husband. They even had a funeral for the baby. So I had many questions. Because I didn't really understand what was going on. My mom explained to me that she did in fact have a miscarriage once. And I was asking her if it was traumatic or scary for her. She is a doctor and psychotherapist. So she explained it to me along the lines of, as a doctor, I can tell you that your body is smart. Pregnancy as a whole is a pretty rare and intense coincidence of time. Cycles, ovulation, conception, and so many other factors. Getting pregnant seems easy, but a lot of things need to correlate and work together for a pregnancy to come about. Your body miscarries when something goes wrong. It knows that something could go wrong or already went wrong. So it decides against it. There is no divine reason for why it is so. There are biological factors at play. It's not a punishment. You are not undeserving. You are not evil or going to be a bad mother. But as a therapist and a mother, I can tell you that we don't always view things as black and white. In theory, all women understand that a miscarriage is a defense mechanism against a theoretically problematic pregnancy. But it is difficult to be logical when you felt excitement or happiness that you were going to have a baby. In the head, many women understand that it just happens. But in the heart, many women can't come to terms that their body didn't accept a pregnancy. And that can be truly difficult to live with. I always think about this in terms of the individual. I have a more pragmatic view. I trust the body to make the correct biological choice. But I also understand that we all react differently. I share your view of it, op. More than I understand women who suffer tremendously because of miscarriages. But I also understand that you had kids. And maybe if miscarriages kept happening and no pregnancy would be successful, it would be heartbreaking as well. Or maybe it wouldn't be. Because you are an individual with your own understanding of what is going on. I absolutely do not think that you are heartless or anywhere near anything close to evil or cold. My mom had the same reaction to her miscarriage as you do. And she is the kindest, smartest and most caring mom I could have asked for. The women's journey is different. We all have our own trauma, our own dream, aspirations and expectations of life. I don't think it's about the miscarriage as a whole. We are all different. You are no less a fantastic or caring mom because you didn't grieve a miscarriage. You sound pragmatic. It's not bad, just different. My mom had a couple miscarriages before having me. Her firstborn. Her reaction was basically, dang it. Now we need to try again. Quote. No. For me, they weren't really babies in my mind until I saw them on the scan. Which I never did with the one I lost. Picked up at the first scan at 13 weeks. If I'd had that baby, I wouldn't have my daughter. And I can't imagine that. No. You have kids too. It would make sense if you didn't have kids or tried multiple times and failed. Normal. You may probably feel differently if you hadn't been able to have children. But with 3 kids, you aren't left questioning your ability to have kids. Or the sadness of what could have been. You certainly don't sound heartless, and if you are, then I am too. I had a miscarriage after my first. And I feel as you do. I have no grief over it at all. But one of my besties was having IVF at the same time. And every miscarriage she had was heartbreaking. So I say the lesson here is that it's fine to feel exactly how you feel. It's all normal.
Not heartless.
Totally normal.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.